Great to be
Maureen,
here.
you have a lot on your plate, and I wish seriously that I could have you on for like a 3-hour show with what's happening in Cheyenne right now. But
Hmm.
I'm going to start with you with what we were talking about online just before this program, because I've been talking about that subject before they had this meeting. Apparently, there was a meeting at a hotel involving the tourism industry. And Maureen, they didn't have some nice things to say about people like you and me. What happened down there?
Well, it seems they were having a big hoo-ha. One of the things that a lot of the lobbyists will do is put together fancy parties with lots of expensive food and alcohol for the legislators, because of course they want to draw them into their little circle so that they'll be a little bit more willing to give them other people's money. And it seems that a representative from your area, Representative Lubnow, was there, and he was giving a speech, I guess, and he said, he was really pleased with how tourism is up, and I kind of had to laugh because tourism revenue is up, and the tourism department spending, of course, is up also. And the what's her name? The Diane Schober, the executive director of the Wyoming Department of Tourism, was saying, well, we're so successful. The cost to run the department is actually a fraction of the amount that the $3.18 billion that the tourism industry brings in, as if her department is the cause of, and in fact, if you look at the way she's done I did the math, if you look at the way she's done her calculations, she's actually taking credit for about half of the amount that the entire industry brings in every single year, as if that the government is the cause of all these wonderful things that are happening in the tourism in tourism in Wyoming, instead of the fact that you've got this park called Yellowstone National Park,
Yeah.
Teton Park. There's a place that's called Jackson. People come here to go skiing, as if the tourism department caused all that. And it's typical of bureaucrat marketing and bureaucrat lobbying also, which is what we see in this particular case. So then what happened with Representative Lubnow is that he said, there are groups out there that would actually like to see the Wyoming Department of Tourism shut down, and people need to get activated to make sure that their legislators know what a wonderful job the Wyoming Department of Tourism does, when in fact really all they do is tour themselves around and
Well,
then take credit for the increase in tourism. And if leaving aside the fact that, hey, the recession is over, people have money to spend on tourism. I mean, the whole thing is just completely crazy, not to mention self-serving.
Well, and apparently, because I complain about the Department of Tourism, that I'm just a troublemaker for doing so. I'm a troublemaker for pointing out that in Jackson Hole and the businesses around Yellowstone and other places like that already spend their own company money to try to bring tourism in, and I just can't seem to justify taking other people's money on something that's already being done voluntarily.
Well, that's right. The underlying issue here is what we call corporate welfare. You've got you've got all kinds of businesses. I mean, it's not just the tourism industry. That a lot of other industries are like this as well. They lobby the government so that the government then takes money out of your pocket and my pocket, and of course the mineral industry pocket, the pockets of the people in the minerals industry, and then they give it to these other groups so that they can spend money on stuff that they should be spending their own money on. Because I mean, there is nothing more wasteful when it comes to government spending than corporate welfare. Because what you've got are politicians who are trying to pick winners and losers in the economy, and there's no worse picker than a group of politicians that are, of course, a bunch of bureaucrats either. And what we've seen with the Department of Tourism, for instance, is their budget going up from about 27 million to almost 30 million if the governor had had his way. The Joint Appropriations Committee managed to cut that back to about 27 million, and then just recently, in fact, I think it was just last night. I can't remember. I was out so late. The conference committee gave the Department of Tourism 600,000 back. So, I mean, right now we're still in a process with the budget of things going back and forth. Things are pretty fluid at this time, but people still have an opportunity to call their legislators and let them know what they think about the spiraling budgets in some of these, in government generally, and in a lot of these departments that really shouldn't actually even exist.
Well, and I've just got you for a short period of time, but one final note on that. I've said to Tom Lubnow many times over, we should call him Speaker of the House, that I would support. I mean, I grew up in Touristville. I'm an island boy here. It was my family's industry. So am all in favor of grabbing money from those people who volunteer it to put together groups that sponsor tourism, but it's money that was donated to, or you can have fundraisers or something. It's volunteered. It's not money that was taken from groups. Now, we had a discussion earlier this week as well about the budget in general. There's the governor's proposed budget, and where are we at now with the legislator, and are they going to be able to meet somewhere in the middle? Where are we at here? Oh,
well, one of the big issue, I think, during this particular budget session is that the governor has got some extra money, and he figures that instead of using it to reform certain areas that really need a lot of reform, like the state pension plan, for example, he's going to take that money and he's going to spend it because, hey, after all, he is probably going to be up for election pretty soon, so he wants to spread the wealth, the other people's wealth, around to these groups who are more likely to vote for them. And I think last week or the week before we talked about pay increases to government workers. Now that the pay increase itself, this just happened actually last night as well in the conference committee, and I'm not totally sure on all the details because neither are they actually. When I spoke to one of the representatives this morning, he said, well, we haven't got our little sheet with what it was we did from the Legislative Service Office yet to be absolutely sure, but essentially the increase in pay to the bureaucrats will not be as high as what the governor was hoping. And the other thing that is actually positive is that the increase in the pension contribution will come more now from the bureaucrat themselves than from the taxpayer. Because in the past, as we've discussed, what's happened is that bureaucrats contributed nothing, and then at this particular point in time contribute at least nothing, but there's very, very little, their own retirement. What the governor wanted to do was roll back that very minuscule taxpayer relief and have the taxpayer actually continue to fund more and more of the bureaucrat's own pension plan. But what the Joint Appropriations Committee has done, and rightly so, is said, no, look, what we're going to do is, yes, we're going to give you a pay increase, but we're also going to increase the amount that you yourself have got to contribute to your own pension plan. It's fundamentally wrong to force people, many of whom do not even have a pension plan, to fund the pension plan, and in many cases a very gold-plated pension plan for somebody else. So this is one thing that looks like it might be positive. Yes, we're going to have to pay bureaucrats more money. They're going to have to contribute more to their own pension plan. The contributions themselves are going to have to go up. And once all of the machinations are finished, we'll have a better idea of what that's going to be. But at least it's a move in the wrong direction. But as I mentioned to one of the legislators today, you know, you can think about the state being on this big pension plan Titanic. The iceberg is way in the distance. We still have time right now to turn the Titanic around. Are we doing it? No.
No, yeah.
But at least we're sort of slowing it down a bit. And what was likely going to happen the next time we have a huge fiscal crisis is that then we're going to be able to actually get the political will to reform the system so that we're not actually going to hit that Titanic and sink like a lot of municipalities already have done in this country.
Well, yeah, and so many states and cities across the nation, and some of them who should have as much money or more money than we do, but they went ahead and, well, as you said, hit that iceberg. So what kind of reaction have you seen any from the bureaucrats now that it's been offered that they might actually have to pay more? I mean, I doubt you're going to hear a big hooray huzzah from them.
No, I mean, I haven't heard too much, but the one thing I have heard is they figure that the small increase that they've got is not anywhere near enough. They wanted more like 8% instead of 2% over 2 years. So.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Now, let me jump over to, and I hope this is all within the ballpark of what you're talking about. The governor has extra money, so of course this means the governor sees a way to spend this extra money. And also, if I remember right, in his State of the Address, offered to the legislators, hey, there's a little extra over if you would like to figure out how to spend it too. Has anyone offered paying anything down or paying anything off with this extra money?
No. As far, pretty much all I've seen so far is a move in the wrong direction. And the Game and Fish Department is a really good example because it was actually singled out by the governor as a department that last year made a few cuts. Yes, it's true. and made some cuts that weren't really cuts, but in fact spending delays.
Right.
And he figured, well, you know, they cut, so in 2013 and their 2014 fiscal year budgets, they cut a total of $6 million. Well, they're getting if everything goes forward as it looks like it's going to, they're going to get that back and more. So the government wants to give them an additional $3 million in the general fund, and what they're looking at doing right now is shifting off an additional $7 million from the commission budget to the general fund budget. What you need to understand about the Game and Fish Department is it, like the Wyoming Department of Transportation, has two budgets. They've got the commission budget, which at one time we used to call the hidden budget because it wasn't under the purview of our elected officials, but it is now, thanks to one of the legislators that brought a bill forward to bring that under the Sue Wallace, I'm sorry, who brought that bill forward. And so now they at least look at that budget and understand that the Game and Fish Department doesn't have a budget of $10 million. No, it has a budget of more like $70 million. And this was something that the legislators didn't really seem to understand, because when we were talking about budget cuts, we said, well, you know, you're going to need to cut this, you're going to need to cut that, and they were all, oh, up in arms, my goodness, you're going to cut us to the bone. Well, hold on a second, your budget isn't $10 million, it's actually $70 million. So, in fact, it's 10 million per biennium, it's 70 million per year, so it's more like 140 million in a biennium, not 10 million. So let's compare apples to apples. When we're talking about cutting $6 million out of a $70 million budget, or actually $140 million budget, that's a big difference from cutting $6 million out of a $10 million. I mean, it's just night and day. So that's what
I'm glad we had some conversations about this, because I've been busy with a lot of things, and so I haven't had a chance to dive into the numbers like you did. But as I look at the numbers, I wound up a little bit confused, and I finally had to just stop and say, okay, hold on a second now. We are spending more, but then there are some that would make the argument, so I'm going to give you a chance to make the counter argument. But we're still well within budget, aren't we? I mean, we're not running a deficit, are we, Maureen?
Well, that's actually a very good point, because what we've seen, what we're looking at right now is a $300 million excess, which the governor figures he's going to be able to spend. This is actually how he's funding the pay increases, the increases to a lot of these agencies, and whatever else it is. Oh, and a bunch of other things he's spending on that we probably won't have time to get into, but it's completely outrageous. The problem with that, though, is about 200 of that 300 million, 200 million of that 300 million came from realized capital gains. Now, if you've got any stocks at all, or any assets at all, you know that a capital gain today can be a capital loss tomorrow. And in fact, that's something that has already happened. We've got, even though we have a realized capital gain, we've got now capital losses in some of our fixed income accounts. The Consensus Revenue Estimating Group discussed this with the Joint Appropriations Committee back in January, and they said that in one of these funds that is now showing a capital loss, it's very unlikely, given the rising interest rate environment we're probably about to find ourselves in, that we're going to get into a gain position anytime soon. So we're going to be seeing a loss in that account for quite a long time. So one of the senators during that meeting said, well, why don't we take this gain that we have and put it forward towards this loss? And he said, oh no, that's against the rules. We don't do that. We have to offset losses with future gains, not with current gains. And so the senator said, but aren't we gambling with the future?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, we are.
We are. Let's get into that more in just a minute. I got to pay some bills, speaking of future gains. By the way, if you have any questions for Maureen from Wyoming Liberty Group, the phone number 307-363-4093 is the phone number. So, Maureen, as I take a look at what the governor is proposing, what the legislator is opposing, well, I wish they were proposing, I see a lot of projects that are getting extra funding. Can you say there's anything that in Cheyenne they've legitimately cut back on that, you know, put a smile on your face? Anything at all?
No.
Okay. Okay. No.
Short answer.
Well, it's been good talking to you, Maureen. No, it's as simple as that. No, okay. I mean, and I also noticed when I was watching the State of the State address, I noticed the governor offering up his ideas to get into many different programs, which you and I would agree is just simply not the proper role of government. But I do at least take a look at, did I get it right? They decided not to go ahead with Medicaid expansion, and how does that affect the budget in the state of Wyoming if they pass that by?
Well, no, they did keep, well, the thing is, in the conference committee just this afternoon, I came running from there to come on your show, they did go ahead with the Senate Medicaid expansion amendment with a couple of amendments. And that's going to be, and I'm not completely sure about that because I haven't been following the Medicaid expansion thing all that much. There were a bunch of bills, they all went down, and then, I mean, and we can talk about that in the context of the Game and Fish Department as well. You know, you've got the forces that would really like to take more money out of your pocket. They're working really hard to do almost anything to get their foot in the door, and Medicaid expansion did manage to get in. We'll have to see if it stays, because that bill still has to go back to the legislature. But, you know, when bureaucrats, union members, and environmentalists get together, you want to grab your wallet and you want to run for the hills. And you wonder why, or you probably don't wonder why, but if you're kind of wondering why the Game and Fish Department has been getting so much extra attention, this is one of the reasons. You've got the AFL-CIO, you've got the Nature Conservancy, you've got Wyoming Wildlife Heritage Foundation, Wyoming Wildlife Federation. Whenever there's a travel committee meeting, these people are up there calling for more money for the Game and Fish Department. And one of the reasons their general fund budget is spiraling out of control is because the amount to manage wolves has more than doubled, from about $600,000 to almost $1.5 million. And it's a completely ridiculous thing, because the Game and Fish Department only manages wolves in this very, very small area of the state where they're hunted. Any part out of the state where they're considered prey, any part out of this very small area within the state, which is most of the state, they're considered prey animals and therefore not managed by the Game and Fish Department. And yet, since they've been delisted in 2012, the amount to manage them has doubled. It's crazy. And now they want to do the same thing with grizzly bears, because grizzly bears could potentially be delisted this summer. They right now spend about $2 million managing about 25 radio collars, because you know what? They got to get into planes and fly around this area where they think these grizzly bears are and monitor these collars. And then that's what it costs now. They're trying to offload this from their commission budget to the general fund budget. They want $2 million from the general taxpayer. And you can bet that in future years that's going to go to $4 million, $8 million. You know, I mean, where is it going to end? It's crazy. Let's
grab a call real quick. This is Glenn. Who's on the phone?
Hey, Glenn. I know that Maureen tracks the pension fund shortfall, and it's only funded like 72%. I think was the last number. Does she know what that absolute dollar value is?
Well, yeah. According to a report that was given to the Joint Appropriations Committee in September, the unfunded liability has gone up from, it was 1.2 billion back in January 2013. It went with, they made a bunch of assumptions, a couple of very important assumption changes that put the unfunded liability up to 2.2 million, and now I'm just talking mainly, 2.2 billion, and I'm talking mainly now just the big plan, what they call it, so it's for the state workers. So that you've got an unfunded liability of about 2.2 billion, and you're right, it's 72-something% funded. And part of the reason the unfunded liability went up so much is because they changed their investment earnings assumption from 8% to 7.75%. Now, if you could, you know, I would give them all of my money if they would guarantee to me that they would give me 7.75%, because who gets 7.75% in essentially a risk-free investment? Nobody. It's crazy.
Well, so, and we got about a minute for you to answer the question here, so if you can sum it up. So are we looking at really just a problem like most other states have that can be on budget this year, but it's all just a matter of future liabilities that they're just refusing to pay attention to? Am I right?
When it comes to the pension plan, yeah. I mean, if we have another big drop, you know, like another big drop off in the stock market like they had in 2008, it's going to be even worse underwater again. What we need to see from legislators, I mean, before we hit the iceberg, it would be nice if they actually had some political will and started reforming that pension plan, because you know, you've got this system that is funded by people that may not even have a pension plan. It's unfair, and in fact, it's actually unfair to the pensioners as well, because they're expecting. I mean, who pays attention to their retirement fund? They're expecting in 10, 5, 20 years to have a pretty nice pension, but you know, they might be left standing at their mailbox, and that pension check just doesn't come.
All right. Hey, Maureen, always a pleasure to have you on. Good to see you again.